Hello folks, it's Hooves of Doom with another video, and this is about terrain in Warhammer, specifically for myself. And it's a topic of the week video from response to Vince Venturella. I'll post his video down below. You can check that out for more videos on the topic. Paul Conti put out a great video that kind of goes over pretty much everything you'd want to know about how to make terrain and the basic type of supplies and things like that you need. Now, I have kind of a complicated history, I think, with terrain. It's not something that I use extraordinarily a lot in my games. I was just, when this topic came up, I had to kind of think back for a while, and it kind of brought back a bunch of memories of like a bunch of terrain that I used to own that I don't today, because I was thinking to myself, well, all I have is Games Workshop terrain. And then I was like, that's not true. I used to have a whole bunch of other terrain. And basically, when my roommate used to run the local store, and I don't know, he must have like upgraded his terrain or just got rid of some of the older stuff, but I took it all. So I had a bunch of buildings. This would be for 40k for the most part, and they weren't anything too special, but I certainly had those for a time. And then when we moved, and we moved far too often, we actually threw them out. So yeah, but now all I do have is the Games Workshop terrain. I have some of the older hills, the Arcane Ruins and the towers, and some of the 40k stuff. I have the Fortress of Redemption, and a couple like the bigger kits as well. But I don't really use them in any of my games because they're unpainted, or the majority of them are painted. What I have painted is things like the chapel, the ruined towers almost finished. My woods are almost finished. I have 3 woods. And then I have a couple of hills. One of the hills is partially painted, but it's just like brown right now, so I don't use it. That type of terrain will be on my painting desk in the future when I can finally finish these projects I'm working on now. And man, this is kind of a shame. I have a Realm of Battle board. It's been in my closet pretty much since we bought it, and that's another big project that I need to get working on. We played a couple games on it before I just kind of put it away. I wasn't painting, I wasn't doing a lot of hobbying at the time, and that just seemed like a monumental task, and it still kind of does. That's why, and I'm not going to play on it. It's just gray plastic, so it needs to come out, and I need to finish that thing up because I like playing with it. But that said, I think one of the things I'll be doing to augment my table in the near future is probably buy some of the new mats that different companies are putting out and people are using in their battle reports on YouTube. They're pricey, but what I like about those types of mats is the variety, because I would probably buy 2 or 3 different ones, and of course that has a hefty price tag on it. And there's a reason for that with regard to Age of Sigmar, which I'll talk about later. But right now, I have a mat on my table, and that's like the old Games Workshop one. It's just a mono-color green. It works well. I don't really have much complaint. But I have received a couple comments on my battle reports, basically saying that I should get one of the newer ones. But what can you do? So like I said, I have all this unpainted terrain, and my wife loves terrain for some weird reason. I'm not really sure. The one thing that she kind of constantly is pushing me to work on is terrain, because I do have these really nice and pretty rare kind of terrain pieces now that are just kind of on my shelf and unpainted, and we don't use them. and we want to kind of spice things up with our tables a bit. But making terrain, oh man, I think that in Age of Sigmar, there's more room to build, because I think the way that GW encourages people to play, you should really have a lot of terrain. And one of the greatest examples of this is what they're promoting at Warhammer World. Now, obviously, these tables are top notch. These are like really, really high quality tables. But I think that's basically what I would love to be able to play on. You know, I'm not going to get to quite that scale, but I definitely want enough terrain that I can have a variety of different pieces on the table. Because right now I just go back to like the regular 4 or 5 pieces, and we just spread them out a little bit differently every time we play. But it's nice to have that constant variety. So for me, I would say terrain, it's not a massive priority. When I think of painting, I think I need to get my armies finished. But if I am making battle reports, I recognize that people want a nice table as well. So I think one thing I have done with my projects that I'm randomly determining on my series of charts, I've decided to place more of an emphasis on terrain than it was. So there's about 1/3 of the chance that I'll be working on a project will be some sort of terrain. Because I actually, even now that I think about it, I actually do have some of the Age of Sigmar terrain that's not even assembled because it's... So there's a lot of work there to be done, and I definitely want to do it. And I think it does have a big impact on the game. Going forward, yeah, I think I would like to make some terrain, because, in my mind, I guess part of it is I've generally in the past played the local store. They have lots of nice terrain. The store where I do play at has really actually quite good terrain. And so I guess it's taken me a while to realize that, well, number one, I play most of my games at home now. And so I need to kind of bridge that gap, because when I think of painting, I think of painting up armies and taking them somewhere else to play, maybe at a tournament or something like that. But the reality is I play most of my games at home, and I want to improve that experience as well. And for some of the armies, it's really essential. If you think of Wood Elves in Age of Sigmar, or really any of the Imperial Guard regiments, almost all of them have a unique look and feel because they're from different planets that have different environments. And the same could be said, I guess, of the Space Marines with the Space Wolves and things like that. Most people have those based in kind of a winter environment, to herald back to their home planet. And I think that's an important consideration, because if I want to play Wood Elves, I should have a lot of woods on the field, lots of things to block line of sight, and it's a little bit weak right now. And I think that maybe that's partly because of the way that we used to do things in Warhammer Fantasy Battle, where I always loved putting a big piece of terrain right in the middle of the board, but it usually pisses everyone off. I like the idea of armies having to go around, and your army it's not a united front, they kind of get split up, things like that. But I recognize that most people probably like to just play against a flat open field and kind of march across. But I do think that there is a significant transition here with Age of Sigmar. And the games I play at 40K too, I think could use a little bit more terrain. I love the terrain that Games Workshop encourages at Warhammer World. Lots of, if they have an open space, there's still lots of trees. There's a lot of urban maps. I think line of sight is so crucial. If you want to make the game a little bit more tactical, you've got to break up line of sight, so that encourages armies to move more. And Age of Sigmar, I think, is almost quite the same. If you look at the tables that they are encouraging, at Warhammer World, they are chocked full of terrain. They are a completely different type of game set than I think we're traditionally used to with our fantasy models, because it's a game that encourages a lot of movement, really all over the place, and you want to have things that block line of sight. But it's a a difficult transition, simply because it's more varied. In the old world, definitely you could go from the Empire, where you're lots of woods, maybe to the Chaos Wastes, or down south, or if you're playing with lizardmen, you're in the jungle. You're playing with dwarves, you're in the mountains. I mean, there is some diversity there, although I don't think that was always represented on most people's tables. But in Age of Sigmar, where you have, what is it, 8 different realms or so, each has a distinctly different look. And one of the restrictions that I'm having right now is you have all these extra rules for playing in different realms. And the only thing I have is a table with a green mat. And so I can't really justify, well, we're playing in the realm of fire, or, it just doesn't work. You have to use your imagination. But but it doesn't visually work, and I'm certainly not going to make a battle report or something with that look. It's got to only be the realm of life at best, maybe like realm of beasts or something. But even then, if I had a battle mat that had a little bit more varied colors, I think it'd be easier to blur those lines a bit. But when it's just a monocolor bright green, it's really the realm of life, and that's about it. And most of my terrain, because it comes from the old world, doesn't really match what's going on in the fluff. It should be a lot of ruined buildings, a lot of ruins, castles, and things like that, and just a landscape that's fairly tortured and bizarre. Lots of things that don't work according to the layout of a modern landscape. Weird mountains and cliffs and things all over the place. So I think that Age of Sigmar is a far different, it calls for a different use of terrain than anything that we're used to. And the game, as it's been out now for 9 months or so, I think a lot of us are still catching up to what it is trying to represent and encourage, because most of the people haven't gone out and made a completely new type of terrain system in the past year. But not only that, I'm not a huge fan of the random rules associated with random pieces of terrain where you roll. I like to have a varied amount of terrain that has specific rules, and then others that have no rules. I don't think every single hill or every single tree necessarily has to have some sort of magical effect. But Age of Sigmar is pushing that a bit, and certainly any of the specific terrain pieces, anything that they've come out with Age of Sigmar, plus a lot of the older stuff, they actually have their own scrolls that have very specific rules for how those are operating. And that's something that in my games we've just completely overlooked for the most part. And so I really want to incorporate that into our games as we go forward. So those are just my thoughts on terrain. I appreciate you guys listening in. If you have any thoughts, I'd like to hear them. And have a good one.